Excellent. Next up, we have Emile Aben from RIPE talking a little bit more about V6 and why it goes away.
Hi. So this is part 2 of 2 of RARs talking about IPv6. So this is my name is Emile Aben. I work for the ripeness, so another RAR, and this is about lost stars. So it's about why operators switch off IPv6, which is what we did a little survey on. And this actually is not my work. This is work from a couple of excellent colleagues I have. Natalie, our IPv6 program manager, Arne and Renee. So I'm just a talking head here. So a little bit of background, and I'm going to show first a diagram of really simplified how you enable IPv6. You get your address space, and these are points that you can actually measure at, get it routed, get it used. So for the last part, get it used, there's a lot of measurements out there. Jeff showed some at 5%. I'm going to show you the other one, which you have probably all seen at least 100 times. Who hasn't seen this graph? No. So Google says 10% of their end users. Jeff says 5%. If you look at the content side of things, if you look at the Alexa 1 million, there's 5%. So that's where we are at. If you look at IPv6 at the endpoints. So one thing we actually do at the ripeness is looking at the routing level. So we take all ASNs that we collect in our routing information system and look what percentage has an IPv6, one or more IPv6 prefixes. And if you look at that yellow line here, that's the global. So you see we're currently at 23% there, so that's yay, higher number. And because we're in the North American region here, I also have the North America region plotted here, and that's also an interesting line. You see 2 trend breaks here, actually. First one was around IPv6 Day, people working towards that, and us getting, and after that it tailed off a bit. And the other one that's really interesting, which is where this region appeared to wake up. And the V pool drained here, and people thought that was probably a good indication of getting your network ready, at least in routing for IPv6. So this is kind of the latent capability of IPv6. This is the people that have actually done stuff in routing already, maybe not brought it to the endpoint yet. So going back also to early deployment, we have something which we call IPv6 ripeness, and the pun is intended there. It's a rating system to measure early signs of IPv6 deployment. So we basically give out stars for 4 things where we see early signs of IPv6 deployment. First one is, does an organization have an IPv6 allocation from us? So that's a simple thing, right? Your very first step. And we have 3 more. One is, are you routing it? And the other 2 are more administrative, like being nice, have your administration up to speed. So it's a Route 6 object and reverse DNS setup. And there's a URL there for if you want to know more about what it looks like in our region. That's the current status. We have over 12,000 members, LARs, which is what we call them. Only 24% has not done anything in IPv4. So this is actually a bit of a deceiving number, but I'll get to that later. 21% have done all 4 of these indicators. And why it's a bit deceiving is because this 30% for quite a long while, to get the last piece of IPv4 address space from our last /8 that we had, you actually had to get an IPv6 allocation from us. So the people who wanted that last /22 of IPv4 had to get their IPv6 allocation. So that requirement got removed in March So, but that's why this number may be a bit bigger than it actually is. People also wanted us to look at actual real IPv6 deployment, just not science for the early steps. And that's why we have what we call a fifth star. That's measuring the actual deployment. And we define a threshold. At what percentage of IPv6 deployment do you get this star? We do that for two categories, for content networks, for access networks. Access networks is actually the data from APNIC that Jeff was talking about. So we're very grateful to Jeff and George at APNIC for providing the data. For content networks, we look at the Alexa 1 million and see how many of these sites are hosted in each of the LARs and what percentage is IPv6 enabled. So if you're over a certain threshold, you get this fifth star, and we give people T-shirts for that, and it's amazing what a motivator something simple as a T-shirt actually is. Because, for instance, in our training team, if the people go out to give an IPv6 training, they make a little ceremony around having this fifth star or not. People getting T-shirts and people getting quite excited about actual deployment of IPv6. At the 16% threshold, we currently have 5.6% of our LARs having this fifth star. But there's also things that are not going so well, and Jeff pointed out some things there already. In doing all these statistics, there's one thing that we noticed is that some people, you usually get use the black arrows here in your IPv6 deployment. What we actually saw was people doing that red arrow there. So they had their IPv6 routed, and they stopped routing it. So Natalie, when she saw these numbers, thought, so what's going on here? Are these false starts? What are people doing here? And we can conjecture a lot about what's actually happening there. But so Natalie decided to actually ask them, so what are you guys doing here? So it's 462 people, 462 registries. She contacted the tech contacts for them and received quite a lot of responses. And a lot of direct emails sent to her telling more of the backstories, and that's what I'm gonna present here about. First thing she did was actually look at where these people are. So if you know ISO country codes, they're at the bottom. GB is UK, but that's the ISO code. Russia and the UK stand out a bit, but that's also where we have a lot of our members. So that's there's no clear regional signal here. So on to the actual survey that Natalie did. First question we asked was, are you aware you previously announced your IPv6 allocation to the global routing table? Luckily, a lot of people actually knew that they were doing this. Some people said no, and it's probably because we asked the wrong people. That's what we figured. The second question, what was the purpose of you actually doing this? And a lot of people said, this was just for testing, so never mind. Some people said this was for production, and it's, so these 16, 17 answers, we actually, so that were production IPv6 settings where people actually removed their IPv6 from the routing table, and the rest didn't know. That's probably the same as the no's from the first question. Third question, what were your experiences during the announcement? So the vast majority here says, oh, we actually had no problems. So that's nice, actually. Software issues, hardware issues, routing issues, security issues, and very, very little customer complaints, as you can see here. So there's some details here where people could send us some comments in. It was only a test. We had actually had a test customer and had but they didn't have the setup ready for us to test it. Hardware, software, people figured out that it actually needed other equipment or needed to change something in the network. And some people reported that, well, we have this nice IPv6 setup now, but we have no means of documenting what we actually did. This one is an interesting one where the networking team was really excited about IPv6 and was doing it, and then a software team said, well, we don't want to do this. IPv6 not supported in my country. That was, I'll get back to that later, because that's actually a really interesting backstory. And the last one here is main engineer left. That's actually a euphemism for what was actually in the survey is the main engineer passed away. Yeah, it's a sad story, of course, on a personal level, but also if you abstract away from the personal level that there's a single person, if the single person leaves, your IPv6 deployment gets stuck. So it makes me wonder how much of IPv6 deployment is actually driven by a single person in an organization, like a evangelist really driving it, versus everybody in. Next question, why did you disable your IPv6 announcement? Well, it was just a test, and there was, we saw it in the previous question already, restructuring, hardware issues, change of ISP, no customer demand. The political issues, so that's actually where IPv6 is not supported in my country. This is two sides of the same coin. And bankruptcy, so people just go bust and yeah, then you don't do IPv6 anymore. So for the political issue, there was actually two countries that were singled out in this, and I won't name the countries, but I'll describe the situations there. First country had sort of a centralized national telco. Everybody had to go through them to get international connectivity, and they didn't do IPv6. So the downstream networks figured out, hey, if we can't do that, we can do tunneling. Well, tunneling is bad, but well, at least we have something, right? Turns out this country is also under sanctions, and tunnel providers, at least the people local, thought either the tunnel provider stopped providing them services or somebody was mucking with the network. But as a consequence, tunnel providers don't work in that country anymore, so IPv6 is not supported. Other countries had very strict data retention laws where you could actually say a lot of things to the local government about what people were doing, and that system just didn't support IPv6 very well. So that's issues that are still out there. So a couple of comments that people had. No interest from customers, so that implies that people were waiting for customer demand for IPv6. Just testing, so getting your feet wet on IPv6. People wanted to get ready, and some switched it off until they actually needed it. Network infrastructure change, so some people did some restructuring on the network, and IPv6 was just the last thing on their list to actually re-enable again. And traffic move to different IPv6 range is another thing where actually maybe a more valid reason there. Hardware security issues, some people were really specific in this was blocking us from actually doing IPv6 in earnest. Second one here is I found quite interesting. We were under a huge DDoS attack all the time. Unfortunately, this was an anonymous survey, so we couldn't follow up with this person. I'm unaware of V6 being specifically targeted for large volumetric attacks, but maybe people with other data can tell me otherwise. What I think might have actually happened here is that they were under a DDoS and just turned off all non-essential services there. And some people did some stress testing, and they had a router that did IPv6 in software, and that just didn't survive. The service provider issues with tunnel broker. The tunnel broker I already talked about. The service provider was just service providers that don't do IPv6 in 2015. That's when the survey was, so it still exists. some people actually did not realize their announcements had stopped. So they were aware they were doing IPv6, they just didn't know it didn't work anymore. So that begs the question, is there a need for better monitoring tools? And this is also the other side of things like happy eyeballs. So now, with happy eyeballs, your customers don't complain anymore, which is a good thing. But it also makes IPv6 problems less visible. Is there a need for better monitoring tools there? That's an open question. Somebody asked us to actually sneak this question in. Did you also stop your IPv4 announcements? And some people said yes, and that was actually people that also went bankrupt, so not surprising. But the majority did not stop doing IPv4. So, when will you announce your IPv6 prefix again? Don't know was what most people answered. So there was no specific plan to actually do something. In a few weeks, that's encouraging. In a year, 3 months, but nobody said 2 years or never. So it's not that people were permanently or felt permanently blocked on anything. We got a lot of feedback like, oh, yep, sorry, we fixed it. So we were basically their monitoring tool. Some said, oh, yeah, we will return resources for the stuff that we're not using. Again, when a customer wants it, again, that implies customer demand. And some people actually said, this depends on our upstream provider. So an upstream provider that didn't do IPv6, so they couldn't do anything there. A last question that we ask is, how can the RIPE NCC help? We have an IPv6 program manager, so we're really wanting to help people getting the issues with IPv6 out of the way. There's a couple of ideas here. Provide more training, tips for addressing plans, pointers for best practices, and discuss IPv6 with governments. We have a website there, IPv6 Act Now, that has some of the addressing plan things, pointers there, and pointers for best practices. But we've taken notice of this, and in as far as we've not been doing this stuff already, we're upping the efforts there. So, as a little summary, what Natalie was actually really surprised about is that people really appreciated us asking. She was a little afraid that, well, you're looking at my network and you're not the internet police, so why do you ask? But people really really appreciated being asked about their IPv6 deployments, and happy to get the story out of the stuff that was not working yet for them. We're seeing various issues still, and most of them are not new: hardware, software, upstream networks. What was seen in a couple of questions is that there was this lack of customer demand, and that implies that a customer will specifically ask for IPv6, and maybe that's a wrong assumption, right? People will want rock-solid IP connectivity, and they probably don't care if it's V4, V6, pigeons, pigs, or whatever. Are these people waiting for something that is never gonna show up? I guess that's the open question there. The monitoring is missing. That's people using us as their monitoring. That's I found that one interesting. And since this survey was really focused on the people in our service region, open question that we now have is, are there people in this region too that had similar issues and would want to speak up on that? Or so if you had these issues, I'd like to talk with you either now or in the hallways, or to see if this is actually local to our service region, or if it's more global. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. So happy to take questions.
Hi, Louis Lee,
Hi.
Google Fiber, and proud. Just started recently, 3 months ago. Yeah. Wanted to find out when Natalie sent out the survey, is there information at the end of the survey for people? I mean, links to help them restart their V6 announcements, or just get over the hump for any of those reasons that they listed as turning off?
In the survey itself, we did not do anything like that, but it's actually a good idea to, if we do more of these, to actually have something like that.
Especially since it's anonymous, you can't really go back to those people. So
Yeah.
next time.
Okay. Yeah, good suggestion. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, Alejandro Acosta from LACNIC.
Hi.
Thank you so much, Emile, for your presentation. It was great. My question is, how much time was the V6 prefix announced before you consider it unannounced? Just a day, month?
No, it was not just like really short ones. I don't know what, it's my colleague who actually did that. If you're interested, but knowing him, it's probably weeks, if not months, before we consider that flap a real flap.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Emile.